The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit GiveStarQuest.com.
This story was not published until 1947. It has not been changed since it reached manuscript form very swiftly, one day when I awoke with it already in mind. One of its sources was a great-limbed poplar tree that I could see even lying in bed. It was suddenly lopped and mutilated by its owner. I do not know why. It is cut down, a less barbarous punishment for any crimes it may have been accused of, such as being large and alive. I do not think it had any friends or any mourners, except myself and a pair of owls.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. I'm Thomas Salerno, and joining me tonight on the panel are Kathryn Laffrey. Hello, Kathryn.
Hey, Thomas.
Hi. And Rob Leonardi. Hello, Rob.
Howdy, Thomas.
And Robert King. Hello, Robert.
Greetings and salutations.
So today, as a break from Middle-earth, but not thematically necessarily, we are discussing a short piece of fiction by J.R.R. Tolkien, Leaf by Niggle. It was published between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, so it may provide us some insight into Tolkien's process, his thinking, and maybe even about how he saw himself working on the great legendarium. So I'll just give you guys, if you've never read Leaf by Niggle before, go read it. It's short. You can read it in probably one or two sittings. Like, I encourage you guys to do that and then come back and listen to this episode, because we are going to spoil the heck out of this story. So first, a brief summary. Niggle is a solitary, kind-hearted painter who believes he is better at small details than the big picture. Looming over Niggle is an inevitable big journey that he needs to go on, noting only occasionally that he needs to pack, but other things always seem to be more important, and he doesn't want to neglect his painting, which is of a large tree. He becomes consumed by it, gradually expanding it with fragments of older works, and he needs to build a shed to house it. Mr. Parrish is Niggle's handicapped neighbor, and he often asks Niggle for help, which Niggle never seems to be able to refuse. After a storm damages Parrish's house and sickens his wife, he asks Niggle to bike in the storm to get help from the doctor and the builder in town. Next day, Niggle is sick in bed, and the storm continued, causing a leak in his house. When he attempts to return to his painting, he is too weak to continue. Feeling better, just as he begins to paint, an inspector of houses arrives, criticizing Niggle that he should have used his painting supplies to create temporary fixes on Parrish's house. But instead, Niggle must now commence the big journey. Niggle is taken to a train and then to a mysterious infirmary where he begins manual labor. One night, two mysterious voices review Niggle's life and determine that Niggle should move on to the new stage. Niggle departs and is dropped off near a forest where he finds his tree painting made real. Mr. Parrish joins, explaining that he was there because Niggle put in a good word for him. So they live and work together. One day, on the edge of the country, they meet a shepherd who says that they were living in Niggle's country, explaining Parrish's garden was now included. Niggle departs with the shepherd uphill towards the mountains, which were in the borders of his painting, while Parrish remains behind, awaiting his wife. Back in Niggle's original home country, despite some townspeople mocking Niggle, one finds a fragment showing a mountain peak and some leaves, and frames and donates it to a local museum, and titles it Leaf by Niggle. Eventually, Niggle and his leaf are forgotten. Then two mysterious voices talk about Niggle's parish, and how it is very useful for others to be introduced to the mountains. When Niggle and Parrish were told about the name, the mountains were filled with the sound of their laughter. All right, so before we dive into this fascinating and, for me, incredibly moving story by Tolkien, why don't we get a little bit of a sense of Tolkien's style, because readers more familiar with his novels, The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or even The Silmarillion, might be surprised at the style in this work. Robert, I believe you've prepared a brief excerpt for us from the story.
Yeah, I'm just going to read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs because it really is quite striking. There was once a little man called Niggle who had a long journey to make. He did not want to go. Indeed, the whole idea was distasteful to him, but he could not get out of it. He knew he would have to start sometime, but he did not hurry with his preparations. Niggle was a painter. Not a very successful one, partly because he had many other things to do. Most of these things he thought were a nuisance, but he did them fairly well when he could not get out of them, which, in his opinion, was far too often. The laws in his country were rather strict. There were other hindrances, too. For one thing, he was sometimes just idle and did nothing at all. For another, he was kind-hearted in a way. You know the sort of kind heart. It made him uncomfortable more often than it made him do anything. And even when he did anything, it did not prevent him from grumbling, losing his temper, and swearing, mostly to himself. All the same, it did land him in a good many odd jobs for his neighbor, Mr. Parrish, a man with a lame leg. Occasionally, he even helped other people from further off, if they came and asked him to. Also, now and again, he remembered his journey and began to pack a few things in an ineffectual way. At such times, he did not paint very much. He had a number of pictures on hand. Most of them were too large and ambitious for his skill. He was the sort of painter who can paint leaves better than trees. He used to spend a long time on a single leaf, trying to catch its shape and its sheen and the glistening of dewdrops on its edges. Yet, he wanted to paint a whole tree, with all of its leaves in the same style and all of them different. And I hope that gives you a sense of the style and manner of story that he's telling.
Almost Lewisian in, it seems more like a C.S. Lewis story than a Tolkien story in some ways.
Yeah, have you read Till We Have Faces?
Yes.
C.S. Lewis's novel? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way that almost seems Tolkien-esque in a way. Yeah. This seems very, Lewisian in its own way.
And one of the reasons I love this story so much is that Niggle is basically me.
I definitely did not come here to get called out like this.
I think we can all be a little Niggle.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's why, this is such a broadly beloved story, is that, Niggle he represents Tolkien clearly, but he also kind of represents all of us. So there's the specific, but also the universal aspect of this story. I want to ask you guys, when did you first encounter Leaf by Niggle, and what did you think of it when you first read it? How about you, Kathryn?
I actually just received this less than, maybe a year and a half ago. I was in the middle of several commissions and preparing for, I think, Christmas. So all the holiday prep that needs to be done, plus taking care of my parents, which I'd been doing a lot of, and saying, I just don't have time for everything. And my youngest daughter goes, Mom, you need to read this book. She goes, "You sound just like Niggle." I was like, okay. And then she goes, wait till after Christmas. Give yourself some time. Oh, yeah. And on top of it, that was also the year that my studio flooded and I had to break everything down, move it to another room, rip up the carpet. So yeah. It came at the right time and was just the medicine I needed.
Wow.
And it was strange to hear my own words on Niggle's thoughts and mouths.
So very providential encounter.
Yes.
With this story.
Yes. It also took me all the way back to one of my art history classes in college, long time ago. And I remember for the first time seeing an unfinished masterpiece. And I think it was one of Michelangelo's carvings. And ever since then, I have been like, oh, what am I going to leave unfinished someday? As an artist, that just like hit me hard.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my goodness. And so like anything I work on, I go, is this going to be the last? Am I going to finish it? Please, Lord, let me finish. It's like, yeah, I always wonder.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How about you, Rob?
I first heard this in last summer. June, July of 2025. I ended up buying the Tales from the Perilous Realm because I heard that Roverandom was a good book, a good short story, which I hope we get to in this podcast sooner than later. And I finished it and noticed that there's a few more, and I got to Leaf by Niggle. And I was like, wow, this is just, the eschatological aspect of this is just beautiful and in very depth. And as Kathryn and Robert both said, like, hey, I might be Niggle. So it was very, as for a religious nerd like me, just being like, yep, that's hitting home right there.
How about you, Robert?
I'm kind of astounded that Kathryn and Rob, that this came so recently into your lives. This story has been living with me for decades. I don't remember when I first encountered or read it, but I know by the time I was working on a master's thesis I was trying to compare Tolkien and Flannery O'Connor, and it was very much on my radar at that point, and that thesis never came to fruition, ironically enough.
Is there one leaf of it somewhere?
But not because of the same reason that Nichols didn't.
No. Very short rabbit trail. I just could not find a director who was interested in both Tolkien and O'Connor.
Really?
Yeah. The people who thought, oh, Flannery O'Connor is a great Catholic writer, looked down on Tolkien as writing pulp trash. And those who saw Tolkien as a great Catholic writer looked at Flannery O'Connor and said, what a literary snob. And like the two worlds could not overlap. I couldn't find anyone.
That's funny because I know plenty of people who love both of them. So it's like that's strange to me.
Yeah, you would think, but at least at the place I was studying, I couldn't find anybody who would direct my thesis. Anyway, all that to say, I've been living with this story for ages. I read it, not quite every year, but regularly, and it still makes me cry every time I read it because it me.
Yep. And a lot like you, Robert, I've been living with this story for a long time. I must have been in college when I first encountered it. One of the seminaries in our diocese used to hold these kind of monthly lectures where a different speaker, sometimes a priest, sometimes a lay person, would give a talk on a certain topic. And I remember very distinctly this one priest in our diocese gave a talk on Tolkien. And of course, I had already read The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but that was the day that I was introduced simultaneously to both The Silmarillion and Leaf by Niggle, because he read excerpts from both the Ainulindale and Leaf by Niggle during that lecture.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The beginning and the end.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, I had to go out and find both of these works, like, immediately after that. So, yeah, you know, Niggle is me. I still get choked up every time reading this. Shameless plug. Maybe it'll be in the show notes, but I have written on Leaf by Niggle before for Word on Fire's evangelization and culture website. A couple of years back, I did an article sharing my thoughts on this story because I just love it so much. And I was shocked, honestly. Like, Dr. Holly Ordway does most of the Tolkien writing for them. So I was actually shocked when the piece got accepted, because I'm like, oh, you mean she hasn't covered it yet? But yeah, no, I love this story, and I'm glad that we've finally gotten to it on this show. Maybe appropriate coming after our marathon through the Silmarillion, because I feel like clearly what's on Tolkien's mind as he's writing this is not just the Lord of the Rings, which he famously struggled to finish, but also the Silmarillion, which ended up not being published in his lifetime. So yeah, Rob, I wanna riff on something you said, the eschatological elements in this story. What were you thinking of specifically? I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the concept at the very end of the mountains, like that was something that when I read that, and it was just like that's beautiful, because the mountains, they were always in his painting, right? But never was the central focus. They were always tacked on and part of the background of his painting. And yet that's exactly where the shepherd's leading him, and always uphill, always leading him up, right? And then at the very end, when they perish and Niggle are told that the name of their country that they created together was Parish, or Niggle's Parish, and that the mountains filled with their laughter. Like just the, I can imagine like the saints up in heaven and being like, they're actually using what we helped them build. Like, they're doing it, guys. They're like, look at these guys. Like, they're following in our footsteps. Come on to get up here. Like, it just, that's kind of what I thought of when I read this. Like, that's what the whole idea of why we have our saints and the cloud of witnesses in heaven, and like they're all up there laughing and cheering, just having a great time, being like, yeah, guys, let's go, come on up here.
Come on down, right? The famous, I forget what game show that is, but
Price is Right.
Price is Right.
Yeah, right, of course, yeah.
Yeah, in this case, though, it's come on up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Further up and further in, as C.S. Lewis would say, yeah.
Well, and I mean, speaking of the mountain imagery, I mean, this mountain imagery also occurs in Lewis's image of the afterlife, the Great Divorce, and which was also published in 1945. It's interesting to kind of compare the two works. I don't know how much they influenced each other on this, but there are some striking both similarities and differences in the works. But one of the similarities is absolutely that imagery of the mountains, of moving into the heights, which, you know, of course, both of them are drawing on the Bible in some respect and spiritual traditions throughout history that have up as the direction of the divine, right? Up as the direction of heaven, and so climbing up the mountains and the idea of what's beyond is a mystery.
Do you have any thoughts on this, Kathryn?
For me, it was interesting as a painter, artist, embroiderer, whatever. Just the thought of when icons and sacred art are being made, they're supposed to be windows into eternity. And here you actually get the flip side of that. You're in eternity and seeing that Niggle's creativity, a gift from God, was what eternity was. And so it really was a window into eternity. You're literally there in it forever. I love the fact that when Niggle was in the workhouse, there's the quick little, he said it felt like 1,000 years. And I was like, oh, how long will we be working it out? Just the way he was working through things. And
very purgatorial.
And it brought me to Teresa of Avila's Interior Castle. It had a lot of that same movement and feel to it. And then just thinking, I'll be going ahead to prepare a place for you. And I was like, yeah, this is, and it's neat that God gives us the creativity to be part of that preparation, that preparing a place.
What's done in eternity echoes in life.
And
again, this is an overlap that there's something more real about what is the manifestation of our actions in the eternal. It's more real, it's more full, it's more complete than what we do in this life. And this is coming from Tolkien's sort of, among his roots were the Christian strains of Platonism. And so you have this whole Platonic tradition of seeing the things that are unseen are more real than the things that are seen. And that when you finally get to experience the things that are beyond what we can experience in this life, it will be so much more, we tend to think of heaven or of the afterlife as kind of ethereal. We think of the spiritual as something that's kind of vague and without like a lot of concrete sensory detail. But Tolkien insists here that, yeah, it's more real than the things that we experience in this life.
Like the things of Earth are the shadows cast by things that are more real.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And to your point, Robert, like that is something that is in The Great Divorce as well. When the spirits from hell or limbo or wherever it is visit the sort of outskirts of heaven, they are tenuous, yet everything they encounter in this new realm hurts them because of how solid it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another overlap between these works. Yeah,
between these two works. Yeah, it's fascinating. Like
although in Tolkien, it's not painful.
Right. Yeah.
Or at least that aspect of it isn't painful.
Right. And it's almost like, and I almost don't even think the works needed to have like directly influenced one another. Like, since Tolkien and Lewis would obviously like talk about this kind of stuff, with their confreres in the Inklings and in other, groups they were a part of. So like, I don't doubt that like, these ideas were in both their kind of, creative milieu, so like they could, it's what they're drawing from, this kind of shared, ethos or mythos or whatnot.
Yeah, this shared intellectual tradition.
That's
that they're both coming out of a deep medieval scholarship that is rooted in this Augustinian Platonist way of thinking. Yeah, it's delightful to see like the different forms it takes in their different imaginations.
Right, yeah. And I'm struck that, in his foreword to The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien is very clear that he says, I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations. And yet this is like one of Tolkien's most clearly allegorical works, and it proves to me that he may cordially dislike it, but when he decides to do allegory, he's very good at it. Although, like, calling the neighbor Mr. Parrish may have been a little on the nose.
Well, that is one of the marks of allegory. I mean,
Yes,
Pilgrim's
yeah.
Progress is like the work I think of when I think of what's like your archetypal allegory, and everybody is named, and again Lewis and Tolkien both are coming out of this tradition of medieval morality plays where you have people literally named after the virtues and the vices and so on, just as in Pilgrim's Progress. So,
right,
yeah,
or
Mr.
Piers
Parrish.
Plowman.
Yeah, Piers Plowman. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So, like, do you guys think that the workhouse is purgatory, or is it one-to-one purgatory, or is it something else? That's something that's always interested me.
To me, it felt one-to-one purgatory.
Yeah.
The way
much.
it was done lovingly and yet strenuously seems like that would be the most merciful way to work through those things that you did not work through. And I thought it was interesting how they kept talking about what he packed. Someone going, it's like, we don't take anything with us. But then I'm like, what was he supposed to pack? Was it virtues? Was it graces? What was he supposed to pack? Because they were expecting him to pack something. So.
Well, and I think like I said, like Kathryn, I think directly one-to-one purgatory, because you have, while he's working through all of this stuff, he starts off wishing he had just one more week to finish his painting. And as he's continuing to work, he forgets why he wanted one more week. And he continues on and just forgets that he wanted one more week. And the idea of how purgatory burns away the things that we're holding on to of this earth. And, they talk about how like the fires of purgatory are hotter than the fires of hell, because when hot fire will actually melt gold and will shape it, and you get a beautiful ring or a necklace or something beautiful out of melting down gold. But if you just stick a piece of gold into a furnace that's not hot enough, it's just going to be torment. And so you have all of those impurities burnt out in purgatory, and just like this, Niggle has all of those things just completely forgotten about because he's now focused on what he's doing. Even though to him it's kind of a meaningless task, it's still him working it out and burning off all of those impurities that he had while here on Earth. And then when he's ready to go to the next stage, he's able to go and make amends with Parrish and build this beautiful country that they both contribute to, and they can both set up for other people to then travel to and get a taste of what the mountains are and eventually move on from there. So, it almost seems like there's another stage in between purgatory and heaven, or it's just another, at that point, it's another type of purgatory where it's, he had to burn off all that stuff and in the impurities, and then when he goes into the next stage, it's now we're shaping it. Now we're we burnt off all of the gold, we burnt out all the impurities. Now we're shaping it into that perfect ring, that perfect. Okay, I can't keep saying ring on Lord of the Rings stuff, but the good type of ring, like that just that beautiful gold aspect of it.
You know what I was thinking?
Oh, go ahead, Kathryn.
It's tying in the very end of the story, where we're back in the contemporary our world, and the museum burns down. Yeah, it's like like the stories are paralleling each other. It's not like, oh, that happened and ended, and now we're back with them cleaning out his house and his studio. But when you talked about the burning off, and then, they had the one little piece of the canvas that was left, that was the leaf, and then the museum burns down, and it's like, it's now been purified, because what the painting was supposed to be, that all-encompassing picture of eternity and not just a leaf or a really well done tree, has been fulfilled. And so it's neat that tied it in. Thank you, Rob. I like that tie-in.
Rob, as you were talking too, it struck me that that in that first stage where he's doing that kind of, burdensome kind of drudgery work, he is being purified. And then it's like the next stage is purifying his relationships. Mm-hmm. So once he has been made whole, the relationships that weren't quite right in the quote unquote real world, his relationship with Parrish, that is purified, that is made whole. So it's like those steps: first self, then relationships, and then you're ready to enter the mountains.
Right. Yeah.
It reminds me of one of my favorite passages from Lumen Gentium, actually, which, and I'm not going to get it exactly word for word, but it's something along the lines of, God has chosen not to save us as isolated individuals, but as a people, as a community in relationship, because what our salvation ultimately is communion with God, is relationship with him. And so I think it's really significant that second stage of purgatory is about him sharing his purification with Mr. Parrish, and that they are together in this process, that none of this is happening ultimately alone, and we are never alone as we go through it.
Especially because God himself is a community of persons within the Holy Trinity. And I like that, Robert, because you have Parrish and Niggle working together, and then Niggle continues on, but Parrish is like, wait, I'm going to wait for my wife. And we can only imagine what happens with he's going to work with his wife there until whatever issues they had are together and they can move on. And who knows, maybe his wife brought her sister or, whoever else. Like, this story is so rich, and it's such a short story, but it's so in depth.
I mean, like the way he's finished in the workhouse, you get the whole discussion about him, and Niggle brings up Parrish and is speaking kindly of Parrish, and it's because of that later on Parrish is like, oh, thank you for asking for me, helping me to get to this point. But like you said, Thomas, it's because Niggle was fixed himself first and then was able to have that relationship. And I love that Niggle was now gardening, and Parrish is finally seeing beauty.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, beauty matters, people.
Well, and I think this brings out something when we think about purgatory, we think about the sufferings of it and the purifications and the difficulty and the pain of it all. But part of what we need to prepare to experience God directly is to learn how to enjoy what is good, how to enter into his rest. And even in the workhouse, this seemed to be the point of what Niggle was going through. It was not learning how to be more productive or to complete his work or anything. It was to learn how to rest. There's this passage. Where is it? Yes. He had no time of his own except alone in his bed cell, and yet he was becoming master of his time. He began to know just what he could do with it. There was no sense of rush. He was quieter inside now, and at resting time, he could really rest. And that allows him to really rest even when he's working in the world of his painting. And I think it allows him to create a place where others can learn to rest as well, starting with Mr. Parrish.
That hit me so hard in the last couple of months when I had just a back pile of commissions. They're still piled up. What was supposed to be done in 2025 has now become 2026. But I was so obsessed with it has to be done on this day at this time because it'll be so perfect if it's done then. And nothing was happening the way I thought it would. And it's like I finally had to reach out to my clients and like, hey, sorry, this and this is just, life is a mess right now. And they're like, it will happen when it's supposed to happen. And that rest, finally felt it. I was like, I can be functioning and rest at the same time. And it's like, yes, that's what life is about. Don't try to control it. Do what you're supposed to do when you can do it. Give it to God. If it's one leaf at a time, it's one leaf at a time. If it's to the mountain, go to the mountain, but follow his lead.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience over the last few weeks. I was working, I've had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, and yet I also had a very hard upcoming writing deadline where I had to turn in 4 chapters, in a relatively short period of time. And I was like, at first, I almost wanted to back out of the project. I was like, God, I don't know if I can do this. And then I just, I felt this sense of peace with the thought that, like, if I hand it over to God, like you said, Kathryn, he will make sure I have the time and that I also have the rest from everything that's been going on. And it turned out I finished the 4 chapters with 2 or 3 days to spare before the deadline.
Praise be to God.
Yep. And it's like, and I always made sure when I sat down working on that stuff, I'm like, Holy Spirit, I invoked the Holy Spirit. And then I found that the words flowed. I wasn't stressed out about it. It wasn't me constantly panicking, thinking, well, I finished this before the deadline. I was able to work in peace, which is almost itself a kind of rest. It's very, without the kind of like rushing work. We're always rushing. We live in a very harried and hurried time period, I think. And I think this story, Leaf by Niggle, can be kind of a corrective for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
One other thing I wanted to talk about was the characters of the 2 voices who are not named in the workhouse. And at first, I've long been confused by these 2 voices. But I see here in your notes, Robert, in our document, that there might actually be a 3rd character who I've been missing this entire time, even though he's right in front of me. And that is there's not just 2 voices. There's also the porter on the train where Niggle goes to the workhouse.
Oh, yeah, my goodness.
Robert, you discovered it. Or like I always thought like 2 voices. I'm like, but there's 3 persons in the Trinity, and now there's this other character.
The advocate.
Robert, what do you?
Goodness. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I want to start off by saying that this is obviously not a one-to-one correspondence with the Trinity, because that would be modalism. But I do think it's that the porter and the two voices are working together, and that they each are working for the good of the people who come through the train station and to the workhouse and are moving toward what is beyond, toward the mountains. And yeah, they each seem to have a different role. The first voice seems to be the one who speaks for the facts of the matter and the difficulties and the obstacles and the problems that are here. And the second voice seems to be the one that is speaking for the possibilities of what's behind those facts. What are those facts representing, and where is the goodness that can be found in those facts? Always looking for what is good and how can we draw that goodness out. And then the porter is the one who directs. This is where you're going. This is where we go next. This is what we're up to. And intriguingly, it's the porter who names Niggle's parish. It's the porter who gives voice to what is happening. And I'm not sure how this lines up to Father, Son, Spirit. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's no connection to the Trinity at all. It just happens to be that I'm imposing this number 3 upon the work. But
it fits nicely.
I used to think too that the one voice is justice and the other is mercy. Where like you say, Robert, where like one is very concerned with the facts of the case and what should happen to Niggle if in terms of what is justly required of him. Whereas the other voice seems to take a more merciful tack and talk about extenuating circumstances and things like that.
What's fascinating is you can see that in faces of Christ and icons.
Yes.
If you cover one side of his face, you get the just judge. If you cover the other side, you get the merciful. And so it's quite fascinating to have that aspect almost in one.
And there's also the character of the shepherd as well, who leads Niggle to the foothills of the mountains. So yeah, it's almost like it, even though it is an allegory, it almost doesn't need to be a one-to-one. Like, this isn't a theological treatise. Like,
no,
it is.
I mean, yeah. It's the same thing with Lord of the Rings, where you have a Christ figure in Aragorn, Gandalf, and Frodo. Like, it can be more than that. But I honestly think that's a beautiful imagery of Father, Son, Holy Spirit with that. That just blew my mind tonight. I honestly totally forgot about the porter. I honestly thought that this was probably like Saint Peter and Jesus. Like Saint Peter's like, hey, we got to deal with this, and Jesus is like, come on, he's doing really well. and then the first voice being severe is like, well, it's up to you, like you have the last word, and Jesus is like, well, yeah, I do. He's going on to the next stage. Like, I could just I thought that was a great picture before I thought about the porter.
Oh, Lord, these are rejecting you. Shall we call down fire from heaven upon them? No. That's not the way we're doing this.
And some other characters I hadn't really given much thought to before looking at our notes here is the town council, the folks on the town council back in the quote unquote real world, the world of Niggle's former life. You have the schoolmaster Atkins, this Tompkins person, and then who is very, sees everything through the lens of practicality. And then there's this Perkins. I mean, Perkins is the one who saves the leaf fragment, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, it wasn't the schoolmaster?
Oh, was it the schoolmaster? You may be right.
I don't know.
In any case, they seem to represent different, that these are also allegorical characters, and they seem to represent perhaps views and ideologies that Tolkien himself had perhaps encountered at faculty meetings or things like that,
I did just check the text. It is Atkins, the schoolmaster, who preserves the leaf and has it framed.
Okay.
But yeah.
Gotcha.
Seems like a teacher thing to do. I do have boxes of my daughter's drawings from when they were 3, so.
I think in that grouping. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was just going to say, I think in that grouping, Atkins is kind of the voice of like actually appreciating culture and like the right relationship of like the practical and fine arts and the way it works in the world. And Perkins is more of the like empathetic and appreciative, but not actually engaged. Like it's just like, all words and feelings and no action. Whereas Tompkins is obviously the villain of the practical and the economic and the let's reduce everything to numbers and productivity and everything Saruman-ish. Tompkins read C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man and took it as a blueprint instead of a warning.
Yeah. Perkins is just kind of there, almost apathetic. Oh, yeah, poor Niggle. Never knew he painted. Never knew anything about him.
But that's the thing, like today we know so little about our neighbors.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Right? Yeah, it's like, if my next door neighbors like went on some journey or something happened to them tomorrow, I wouldn't know anything about their hobbies or likes or dislikes. And
then in a year, you're going to start selling their stuff out of their house.
Let alone tell them that the work they've been working on most of their life painstakingly and laying it down too often to help your neighbor is only good for fixing a leaky roof.
Yeah, the inspector of houses. Is he death? I was thinking. Yeah, like
I was thinking maybe Angel of Death, but maybe just leaning towards more of Guardian Angel, and kind of like, hey, you should have done this, but time to go, bud. Let's get going.
Is the inspector the one who says it is the law? Oh gosh, when he says it's the law, I was like, oh, he's throwing it down right there. But then having the driver, not necessarily the porter. It says, who are you? I'm the driver.
Mm-hmm.
When he's, when he dies. And I was just, of course, I'm crying like a baby every time I read that page. But it's fascinating just to think of that moment in your life. Like God says, it's thief in the night,
At the same time, I think the driver is more the angel of death, as it were. The inspector of houses kind of feels like an agent of Tompkins.
Yeah.
Very, very worried about the practicalities of what should have been done. And one of the things that's really remarkable about this story is how, like the laws are very strict in this town, and Tompkins is very interested in making sure those laws are enforced, especially when it benefits him. And he gets the house that Niggle used to live in. And he wants it in good shape. So the inspector feels like he's related to Tompkins in that way for me. But it's also how distorted all our priorities of this life are compared to the world of the journey that we go on. How all our expectations are upended. And again, it's like the practicalities become more practical and more important. You know, the learning of the workhouse and the learning of the gardening and all of the things that were of no importance and were a bother to Niggle in life are more important than even the law and Tompkins could make them. Whereas also his painting and his art were more important and more powerful and more beautiful and just more real than he even dreamed they could be when he was trying to paint them perfectly on his canvas.
It's both ends rather than either or in terms of practicality versus art. Yeah.
There's a lot of times Niggle reminded me of like the reluctant son or servant, you know, where it says, hey, go do this. And it's like, no, but then they go do it. And it's like, so that was like one of his redeeming virtues. He may grumble, but dang, he got it done. He jumped on his bike in the rain to go get, you know, the builder and the doctor. So it's like, okay, he had one redeeming quality there. So.
Don't we all?
Better to do it reluctantly than not at all, folks.
It's like the parable in the Brothers Karamazov, you know, Niggle had his onion and he clung to that onion, and it got him all the way to the mountains. Yeah.
And I feel like, too, this is sort of Tolkien's great ode to his idea of subcreation as well, which, you know, he has just this wonderful idea of, you know, and it, again, sure, not completely original to him. He's drawing on this great, you know, Christian intellectual tradition, but this idea that we are participating in God's act of creation as beings made in the image of God. You know, we make because we're in the image of a maker. And I really just think that this work is really his ode to that and how he saw himself when he was doing this thing to what many other people probably did not seem that practical. It's like, oh, you're fooling around with funny elvish words again. What good is that? You know, like
dragons and elves and you know, goblins. This is all child stuff. This is not worthy of an adult or an academic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wonder if he worried a little bit about that himself. And yet his conviction of the importance and beauty and power of it was such that he couldn't let it go. And I think that's something I definitely see a lot in myself and in a lot of my fellow both people in the fan community and in the writing community, is this sense that, you know, part of me thinks this is just silly, childish nonsense. And it doesn't matter to anybody. It is, as Tompkins would say, useless. And yet it is at the same time one of the most important and you know, useless is kind of its crowning glory is, you know, you cannot, this is so good that you cannot put it to mere use. You cannot reduce it to something like, you know, it is something to be admired, not something to be used like a chair or a tool or something else. It is something that is good in itself.
Right. Whereas today, everything needs to be utilitarian. You know, everything needs to be useful, you know, like where yeah, like some of the greatest things in life have no immediate use.
We even see each other as just assets.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you can't do something for me, why do I know you?
Yeah.
And the idea of just friendship has gone to the wayside. And that's kind of how Niggle and Parrish were. That they just, oh, hey, they talked when, they needed something. And it wasn't until they got into, Niggle's country and Parrish was there and they started living and working together that they started really forming a friendship and what true companionship is about.
Yeah, if you keep your relationships on the surface, you'll miss that beauty. And then it is just the other for necessity function's sake. And it's interesting. I saw a video recently and it was refreshing to see a video from a younger person going, this beauty stuff from the past is really important. And they went as far as saying it's actually better for the world economy and just, you want a green planet. Well, stop putting up these ugly, quote unquote, green buildings because they get dated and torn down a whole lot faster than if you put up something beautiful that took time with a certain craft to it, because it's going to stay for a lifetime and it's actually better for the planet than some glass structure that goes up and comes down and can't be reused somewhere.
Yeah, like gluing yourself to the Mona Lisa or whatever it is not going to save the planet. And you're completely missing the forest for the trees here of what's worth saving, anyway.
And again, everything is worth saving. Even one leaf is worth saving.
Right. Yeah. That reminds me, I wonder if you're familiar with this, Robert. There's a great Ray Bradbury short story called The Smile. Have you read it?
It's not ringing a bell, but go on.
Okay.
Go on.
It takes place in a future dystopia after presumably an atomic war, and people are destroying the memory of the civilization that is gone. Everything of beauty from the previous civilization. They're like, civilization caused this. And so they go through this a communal ritual of taking something beautiful that was made by the previous civilization, like a painting, and destroying it, tearing it to pieces. And there's a boy who saves, almost like the saving of the leaf from Niggle's painting. He saves I'm going to spoil it, but he
is
saves,
it a smile? Tell me it's a smile.
He saves the smile of the Mona Lisa.
Okay.
When all the rest
really
of the
familiar.
Mona Lisa is destroyed, he saves her smile and clings to it. That one reminder of her beauty, that had existed. And
that is so Ray Bradbury.
Isn't it though? That's why I love the guy. I'm like, that is quintessential Bradbury right there.
Yes.
But yeah. I have another question that I want to throw out to you guys, and that's, do you see any parallels between events or figures or themes in this story and things that are in Tolkien's Legendarium, whether it's Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion? Can you guys think of maybe any examples of those?
I mean, like the really pretty leaves that the elves have?
The descriptions of the Malorn trees, yes. I mean, just to begin with, I'm thinking of, I think is it Sam? It's somebody who asks the elves about magic. And they say, oh, well, what you call magic, we just call craft. And that sense of creative activity being something central to to both this life and to, well, for the elves, it's very much about this life because they are bound to the circles of Arda. But that being creative in some way or sub-creative is essential to what it is to be a person. Whether it's an elf or a man with a capital M, a human. That's the first overlap or connection that leaps to my mind.
So for me, it's very much the beginnings of both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. They're starting off on a journey. They know that, Bilbo doesn't know that he has to go on a journey, but he's very much pushed on this journey. He does not want to go. He wants to stay with his books and his everything, right? His couch. And Niggle is like that. He's very much, I don't want to go on this journey. And Bilbo's eventually forced out on this journey. And then we see in The Lord of the Rings where Frodo takes 50 years to decide to begin his journey. Of course, there's other aspects of that and waiting for Gandalf, but just the idea of how are you going to prepare for your journey? What are you going to be packing? How do you prepare for this dragon that you have to encounter or Mount Doom? Like, there's nothing you can pack that is going to help. But you have to prepare in some way, or as Niggle did, not at all.
Yeah, I very much see Niggle and Bilbo as having a lot of parallels, especially Bilbo pre-adventure.
Yes, yes.
And also, to your point, Rob, about what are you going to take with you, but also what are you willing to surrender and give up along the way as well?
Not the Silmarils.
No, definitely not. Mine,
I mean, you can definitely see, Fëanor and his sons in Niggle's attachment to his painting.
Right.
It's not nearly as violent or as egotistical in Niggle. But there's that sense of this is mine, this is my own, this is my precious even. And that learning to let go as the only way to truly be able to possess something. Learning to give away what you make and what you do is the only way to really have it be your own. Is a common theme that runs through all of Tolkien's work, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing that as such a tremendous artist and writer himself, that this theme of how we relate to the art we create and how, whether it becomes an obsession or whether it becomes an act of self-gift seems to be one of the dominant themes in his body of work. And I think that Leaf by Niggle's a standout example of it, almost a distillation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that how much do you think this is autobiographical? I can't say that word. Autobiographical. That's the word.
I mean, the parallels are really clear in some. I mean, he talks about how Niggle is not that great of a painter, though he had some good passages. And I don't know any painter that talks about parts of their work as passages. That's clearly a writer thinking about their writing.
Yeah, I think it represents some of his fears, that he would never finish, that none of this crazy stuff that he'd been working on since he was a young man would ever see the light of day, or that no one would remember or care about it, despite all of the work and effort and passion that was put into it. I think anybody who's a creative person has that fear, existential dread somewhere in the back of their mind. And yeah, again, another one of the reasons why I find this story so personally impactful, and why I go back to it, even though it hurts me and it makes me cry after reading it, why I keep going back to it.
Oh, I was definitely glad at the time of recording. This is just before Lent. This was a good reread at this time, just to kind of help assess, am I doing what I'm doing for others, or am I doing it for myself?
Yes.
And that was very helpful reading this.
So did you guys have any other closing thoughts on Leaf by Niggle before we wrap up our discussion?
We've kind of taken it for granted that this is an allegory of dying and purgatory and entry into heaven, and I think that's absolutely one of the key ways of reading this. But as we've been talking about, I think it's also about the importance of art itself, and in a more philosophical, maybe less theological way, it's about the importance of art. Whether or not Niggle is dying, it's about the legacy of his art, the legacy of his work, and what it takes for art to really become as real as it can be. Learning those habits of doing the work that's in front of you right now when it's time to do the work, and learning to rest and enjoy the artwork, the beauty, the joy that is around you. And so I don't think it needs to be like, again, it's a both and. I think it's both an allegory for how what we do in this life echoes in eternity, but also how we can live here and now in this life and have, as we so much like to say as Catholics, have a foretaste of eternity already in this life. And art is one of those ways that we gain a foretaste of eternity.
I love that, Robert. And I think that it can be expanded to not just art, but just, our families. Like, I have 5 little kids running around my house, and it's bonkers sometimes. But at other times, it's just like, wow, seeing how they interact with each other, or seeing the things that they come up to me with. It's just like, that is beautiful. That is wonderful. And that right there is the foretaste of heaven. And I'm like looking at myself like, how should I be behaving as a father? Because how would God be looking at this? And if this was me coming up with this picture, how would God be I'm offering this to God. How would God be doing that? And it's just like, that's how I need to be acting. And we can look at this, through art, through our family, through our own careers and our own jobs. And how are we, are we just doing this to get through it and trying to do our purgatory here on earth? Or are we doing this for, not necessarily a sense of creating a beautiful painting or a beautiful story or beautiful music, but what we're doing with our work? Are we doing something worthwhile in the sense of, is it something that is life-giving for not only for us, but for those who are going to interact with it?
Yeah, that's something too that I've been meditating on. Like, how is my work fruitful and generative in that way? Kathryn, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Oh, I think we hit it pretty well. I would just say that this book should absolutely be required reading in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I have a funny feeling that if it was, we'd be in a much different place right now in the world.
So every parent out there, just make sure your kid reads this book.
Absolutely. Several times.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of The Secrets of Middle-earth. But before we go, we would like to take a brief moment to thank all of our patrons who make this show possible, including Father Thomas L., Ben H., Gareth H., Jody F., and Bob L. Their generous donations help us to continue to create The Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows here at StarQuest. You can join them at givestarquest.com. And be sure to follow The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or any podcast directory or app. And you can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X, where we are at SQPN, or Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And don't forget that you can snag your own Secrets of Middle-earth gear, including our very cool t-shirt, at sqpn.com/merch. It's a great way for you guys to support our show and to display your love for Tolkien and his wonderful world of Middle-earth. And so now we'd like to hear from you, all our wonderful listeners. What did you think of Leaf by Niggle? You can let us know on our social media pages. You can send an email to middleearth@sqpn.com, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or on Spotify. And of course, you can always visit our channel on the very awesome StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord, and join us next time for another episode discussing the world of Tolkien and Middle-earth. Until then, Robert King, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Middle-earth.
Thank you for having me.
And Rob Leonardi, thank you as well.
Thank you very much for hosting, Thomas.
And Kathryn Laffrey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Thomas. This was a beautiful, beautiful show.
And I'm Thomas Salerno. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Star Wars. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Wars.